We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the HaltingWinter Podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the HaltingWinter Podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Paz Gomez, Deputy City Manager overseeing every component of public works in the City of Carlsbad, California. Paz, welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you on today.
Thank you.
Well, it is National Public Works Week when this episode airs, and I can't think of a better guest than you. I'm so glad you said yes to this, because not only do you work for a municipality, which is what we highlight here on the podcast, you were one of the top 10 public works leaders for 2025, highlighted by the APWA, that's the American Public Works Association, across all of North America. So I can't wait to dive into your fascinating story, and it is amazing. You are an inspiring legend in not just public works, but I think in leadership. So this is going to be inspiring for our young people who listen, as well as I'm sure a career filled with insights for the leaders that listen as well. So, but before we unpack your professional career, let's do what we do here on the HaltingWinter Podcast. Take us back to the beginning and kind of tell us about where you were born and the childhood that launched this great adventure you've had.
So my childhood and a lot of my growing up and my professional career revolves around the Navy. So my dad and my mom are both from the Philippines, and my dad had studied electrical engineering in the Philippines, but then decided to join the U.S. Navy. And so he came over, brought his wife, and had a few kids. And my two oldest sisters were born in the Philippines. And then my older brother was born in Ventura County. And then my dad used to like to say that I was conceived in Port Hueneme, California, which I will touch on a little bit later, because then my mom was 7 months pregnant when they drove cross country to Great Lakes, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago. And so I was born in a naval hospital. So that's where I was born. And my journey was there for a short-lived 5 months until my dad moved to the San Francisco Bay Area in something called Hunters Point at the time. I was there for a couple of years. Then he moved to Guam. Then he moved to the Philippines. So pretty much my formative years from grades 1 through 5 were in the Philippines. And my initial language was Tagalog. And then my dad was stationed in San Diego. And so he moved all 8 of us kids along with my mom to San Diego. And so my journey started in 6th grade here in San Diego County. Uh, and at that time, quite frankly, I had a very heavy Filipino accent and was in a neighborhood where they didn't even know what Filipino was or where the Philippines was and or is. So my parents had told us that, hey, listen, you need to learn how to assimilate. And so even though we talk to you in Tagalog, we want you to answer back in English and learn how to speak like an American. And so that continued. And those of us who were older kids that could understand Tagalog would do that, where we would hear in Tagalog and we would respond back in English. And then those who were my younger siblings were too young. I mean, the youngest was a baby at 1. And so they really did not learn the Tagalog language at that time. So my journey continued when I just loved the Navy. I loved all my uncles, and we call them uncle whether or not we were biologically related, and my dad, and was just so proud of everyone. And the fact that in the Philippines, those sailors who served in the U.S. Navy were revered, were seen as world travelers, and were seen as being very well off. For those of us here in the U.S., and maybe take a look at our pay scale in the military, may disagree with those in the Philippines, but certainly the U.S. dollar is stretched there in the Philippines. And so I was always proud of the Navy. And when I was in high school was when my dad asked me about what I wanted to do. I wanted to consider engineering, because prior to that, I had always said I wanted to be a teacher. And he said, oh, you're good in math and the sciences. Why don't you consider engineering? And so we did not have the internet at the time. So my dad took me to the library and showed me the different disciplines of engineering. And I thought civil engineering sounded like a lot of fun. So that's what I decided to major in. At that time also was when the Naval Academy had opened up to women. And so I looked into that. But long story short, I did not go to the Naval Academy because I actually graduated from high school when I was 16, and you needed to be 17 to start at the Naval Academy. The age range was 17 to 22. So I said, I'll just go to San Diego State, start studying civil engineering, and then the rest was history. I finished my bachelor's degree there at San Diego State. But while I was there, the Society of Women Engineers had an opportunity for kind of like internship. So during the winter break, which was really 3 weeks, I worked for the Naval Air Station North Island at what they called back then the Naval Air Rework Facility, NARF, for 3 weeks. And they had me doing schematics of the fighter jet F4. And I knew that that really wasn't my thing. And so I had asked about civil engineering and ended up getting referred to the Navy Public Works Center at 32nd Street, or the Naval Base San Diego. And so I ended up going there the following summer and worked as a surveyor even before I took surveying in college. And I knew that this was the right path for me. I also found out that the Navy has the Civil Engineer Corps Collegiate Program, where they would pay you your last year in college if you promise to get your commission after you receive your degree. So I signed up my last year in college. I was living at home with my family and was getting paid over $500 every 2 weeks. And so I was as rich as I've ever been. And so it was wonderful. I loved it. And I did not have to take additional classes or wear a uniform like you do in ROTC. And so it was a wonderful program. And now it actually is a 2-year program. And it's a wonderful way to recruit college students. And then I joined the Navy, or then I got my commission and went through Newport for training, and then, of course, the rest were my duty stations. And then I retired. My last tour of duty was as the commanding officer. It's now the former Naval Facilities Engineering Service Center in Port Hueneme, California. And then I decided to come back home to San Diego and came back. But I wanted to do something different. So I worked for the private sector for about 4 years for an international firm. And so it was called URS, which was then acquired by AECOM. So did that for about 4 years. And then my former mentor, who retired as a Navy captain as well, told me to apply for the Deputy Chief Operating Officer position in the city of San Diego. So I live up here in Carlsbad, was working in La Jolla, which was about, 20, a little over 20 miles away, and down to the city of San Diego. Downtown would have been an additional 11 miles. And I was like, oh, no, I think that's fine. I don't need to fly. I don't need that additional commute initially. And he had been my mentor for such a long time, and I really respected his opinion. And he said, no, this is a great fit for you. He had previously been in that same position under a different mayor. And so I said, I don't even know how to apply for it. And they said, well, you just send in your resume. And long story short, I got the job. And so I worked there for about 3 years. So that was my first exposure to local government, actually being part of city administration, and really enjoyed it. And at that time, the chief operating officer was a gentleman by the name of Scott Chadwick. And so he left the city of San Diego and came up to the city of Carlsbad to be the city manager. And so anyway, long story short, I ended up following him and didn't have the commute down I-5 any longer. And so I've been here now for going on, it'll be 8 years this summer, and have absolutely loved it.
Wow. Okay, let's go back. This is so cool. So this week, National Public Works Week, we're highlighting 2 stories. The episode that came out on Tuesday will be Julie Underwood. She's the Public Works Director in Kirkland. And her story, she was born in Vietnam and came over. And your story, assimilation and trying to figure out who you are in a world that doesn't look like you, doesn't speak like you. So it's very interesting that our 2 stories this week are women who are amazing careers, amazing examples of leadership, and yet your stories have such similarity. So as you're growing up in that environment, again, you have this appreciation for the Navy and this. What was it about? Now, one of the things I think that would be interesting is engineering. When we think about the military, especially as Americans, we think of soldiers, going out shooting people. Like there's so many components, like engineering. In fact, you talked about the Midway in San Diego. I toured the Midway a couple of years ago when I was down there. That is, it's mind blowing. All the stuff. 4 engine rooms, and you're just like, how in the world does this thing even function? Talk about engineering in the military. What did that look like over the course of your career? What do you do as an engineer? Especially, you said kind of you're focused on civil engineering. What does that look like?
So before I go there, just a little sea story at USS Midway. Yeah. The admiral who actually kicked it off and made it happen, he has since retired from that position, was Admiral Mack. And he was actually my boss's boss at the Pentagon the first time that I was stationed there. So I got a chance to see him when we were planning for the Get Acquainted party for the Public Works Expo for PWX. So amazing naval officer, but but there is a connection there as far as the Midway. So a lot of people think that I drive ship. Yeah, I mean, if you're in the Navy, you drive ships or you fly fighter jets or something along those lines. And so there are different communities within the U.S. Navy. And so my particular designator is what we call it, is just the Civil Engineer Corps. And that's what I signed up for. So within the Civil Engineer Corps, there are basically three major types of duty stations or responsibilities, and that's public works is first and foremost. And then there's also construction contract administration, which is really a subset of public works, but that is a separate duty station. And then the CBs, which are the construction battalion arm of active duty Navy CBs. They call it Occupational Field 13. For the most part, the battalions are out of Port Hueneme, California, or Gulfport, Mississippi. And then there are other facets and other duty stations of the CBs. And then there's staff, right? I was at the Pentagon a couple of different times, and then they also have other headquarters types of staff positions. But for the most part, what we do is engineering and construction and operations and maintenance tied to utilities and roadways and taking care of the facilities and the fleets and, whatever it is that you can think of in a normal, say, a city. The parallel is there. So anyone who has had a career or even a couple of tours of duty in the Navy Civil Engineer Corps will really succeed in the local government because it's familiar, it is the same. And so whether you're an engineer, and it isn't just for civil engineering, we also had electrical, we had a petroleum engineer at one point in time, chemical engineers, mechanical. So long as you graduated from an ABET accredited university, which I think was like American Board of Engineering Technology or something like that, certification, or an architect. And so those were pretty much the subset of those that went into the Civil Engineer Corps.
May is National Cities, Towns, and Villages Month, which means it's a great time to recognize the people doing the amazing work that keeps our communities running. The work most people rarely see, and if we're honest, hardly ever fully appreciate. It's the work that doesn't slow down, and yet it's the work that's expected to be done day in and day out. Right now, that work is getting a little bit easier. Across local government, teams are finding small but meaningful ways to operate more efficiently, not by replacing people, but by removing the kind of work that pulls them away from what matters most. Things like drafting routine responses, sorting through data, managing workflows that used to take far more time than they should. This is where AI is starting to make a real impact, and Tyler Technologies is helping local governments do exactly that with tools designed specifically for your world, practical, secure, and built to support your team without adding complexity. Tyler has put together a free ebook on AI and efficiency in local government, along with additional resources to help you explore what this could look like in your organization. Find them all at tylertech.com/winter to help you keep doing the work that matters most. That's tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. So fascinating. And when you think about it, I mean, again, I live up in Olympia, Washington, which is the capital city, and we have JBLM, the huge base. And when you think about that base, the installation commander, in fact, when I was a pastor, went to our church, and he was like, yeah, I'm like a city manager. And at that time, I didn't even know what a city manager was. Like, I don't know. But again, you think about all the infrastructure, all the engineering that goes into that. And I'm sure that was just a wild, so many things, so many projects, so much work that you don't think about when you think about our military. And so,
that's correct. And it is that the big difference is the city has its boundaries and its limits, and then there's usually an adjacent city or maybe an incorporated county or something adjacent to it. It's very similar. So for pick a military installation, there is an engineer, civil engineer, or public works active duty type that is in charge of taking care of that whole installation or base, all the functions that are in there. And the beautiful thing about the military is that all of the bases are self-contained and self-sufficient. So we even have our own grocery store, right, that we call the commissary, and we have our own version of Costco or Walmart, and we call it the exchange. And it depends on if you're with the Army or Air Force, you call it AFES, or if you're with the Marines, you call it the Marine Corps Exchange or MCX, or in the Navy, we call it the Navy Exchange, NEX. So we have those kinds of infrastructure for the families and those who serve. We also have child care centers and other things that are needed, military housing. One of the projects that I worked on and helped build when I was stationed at the former Naval Air Station Alameda in California was 277 military housing units that were constructed over there, and so it's just very fascinating the things that you get involved with, the big projects, and so on, which are very similar to what we do here in the city.
It's so fascinating that your career has spanned kind of all the big sectors. You've had military sector, which is its whole, it's got its acronym, it's got its own language and its own kind of world it lives in. And then you leave that and you come into the private sector with URS, and then what becomes AECOM. Talk about that. What was the transition like to the private sector, and what kind of work were you doing with that kind of engineering?
So it's really funny how, just a little side story. One of the things that I used to tell my junior officers was, you need to treat everyone with respect. Yes, the rank has its privileges and the rank structure within the military. Just because someone is junior to you, someday when we're no longer wearing our uniforms, they may end up being your boss. So please make sure that you take care of them, and they may end up hiring you at some point. So I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, and was at the Officers Club of Kadena Air Base. My husband is a retired Marine. We were both on active duty at the time. And we met this young lieutenant by the name of Eric Haas, who was there just deployed. And he was with Seabees here at Naval Air Station North Island. And he was just there for an training exercise. And we chatted for about an hour during lunch. And so fast forward 14 years later, I was retiring from the Navy, was interviewing with URS, and I was stationed at Port Hueneme, and ended up going to their office spaces in the LA area, and saw his name at the very end of all the names and everybody else's. And at that time, I didn't do what I'm supposed to do, which is you research who's going to interview you. But I just showed up, and sure enough, he walks in, and of course, he knew what my resume looked like, and he knew it was me.
Mm.
And I turned around and I saw him, and I said, "Oh, it is you." And he looks at me and goes, "You remembered me?" And I said, "Yeah, Kadena Air Base, Officers Club, Okinawa." And then we were buds from then on. So he ended up hiring me. He became my boss. He was wonderful. He did get out of the Navy to work for the private sector, and he was a wonderful mentor. He was amazing at what he did, and I just had the highest respect for him, as well as the regional manager, Sunny House, and she's also amazing. She's here locally, and learned so much from both of them about business development, billable hours, and what it is that we need to do as a business. And I was in charge of the engineers, and my counterpart was in charge of the environmental division. And so it was hierarchical. So I reported directly to Eric and had my crew of different disciplines of engineers, from geotechnical to structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, you name it. We provided all the engineering services. Tied to that, I was also the business line lead for business development for the Navy and Marine Corps. So when I was on active duty and reviewed different proposals that I would receive, consultants, contractors, whatever, I just took it for granted. I had no idea the amount of effort that consultants, engineering firms put into those proposals, the amount of money, time, and effort, as well as the preparation and finding out about it ahead of time, so that you have the partnership with those that would sell what you have to offer to that particular agency. And so my hat's off to those in the private sector for being able to do that and continue to compete and stay in business. And so it was an amazing learning opportunity. But then what I realized was when my mentor had reached out to me and said, "Hey, you should consider working for the city of San Diego." When I got there, I realized that who I am is more about service. That's why I stayed in the Navy as long as I did, because I loved serving my nation. So with the city of San Diego, it was serving the community, which was public service, was more along the lines of what I was about, more so than about making money and, the bottom line in business. And so that's why I've stayed on. But those 4 years were wonderful. I enjoyed it. Great people. I still run into them. Quite a few had actually transitioned into the public sector as well. And others have continued in the private sector and have just got promoted and are doing amazing things.
I love it. It's one of the things as I've worked with the APWA and spoken at conferences across the nation for different chapters. One of the things that's unique about the APWA is it's both public and private sector. It's the reality of, like, a city can't hire all the public works, people that it will need for all the various projects. Specifically, and the two that come to my mind are like the LA fires just happened. And I spoke actually for the League of California Cities right after that for their public works leaders. And one of the things I highlighted was, a devastating event like that happens, and we think about the fire personnel who come on or the heroes of the moment. But we don't think that public works are right there alongside them, making sure roads are accessible. Think about all the lights, the traffic, as people, they have to be recoordinated as people are fleeing and exiting. evacuating. Like, that's public works doing all this engineering component behind, but then it's public works. The firemen and women get to go home after the event's over. Public works has to clean that up and figure out how to rebuild and all that engineering, all that infrastructure. And so I love highlighting both the realities of public works, but then that span of both, of like, it takes a private sector, it takes, these organizations that will come on and be able to be a part of different projects and help. Because again, especially a city, whether it's San Diego, a huge city, or whether it's, little tiny city, a little tiny town, it can't do all that it needs to do to keep up the infrastructure for our people. Maybe speak to that for a moment before we dive into San Diego and Carlsbad. What is that? What does that look like with public works and that partnership? And what did that kind of, your time in the public sector or in the private sector, what did that look like?
And, it's very interesting. I did not get involved with APWA until I started in the private sector. I had heard of APWA, but prior to that, the organization that I was most involved with, because I was in the Navy Civil Engineer Corps, was the Society of American Military Engineers. And so SAME, wonderful organization, very similar, but the target is really to support those of us in uniform doing public work stuff, right? And so I was involved, I was engaged at every duty station with regard to being an officer, being president, vice president. I was even involved with the national board of direction that they SAME had. And so early on, it had been emphasized that those of us in uniform couldn't do our job without our partners, our civilian partners, with contractors, the consultants, the engineering firms, and then also adjacent cities, adjacent communities. So it isn't just those of us wearing our uniform in whatever military town that we may be at. So even early on, I had appreciated them. And I had heard about this APWA thing when I was stationed up there at Fort Hueneme. I was the president of the SAME Ventura Oxnard Post. And one of the captains that had retired had worked for the private sector. And he had come to talk to us and said, hey, APWA is just like SAME, but it's for the cities, right? And I was like, wow. At that time, I was like, oh, okay, it doesn't mean anything. But then when I did get into it in the private sector, it was like, oh yeah, absolutely. We want to foster that relationship. And I was in the private sector at the time and developed that relationship with the cities, right? And so I got to know some of those in the local agencies. But it was a whole different world when I went into the city of San Diego. And it's very interesting because the public servants were so dedicated to just getting the job done that to them, APWA was just like, oh, I just don't have time to do it. And it also depends on whether your city or your particular agency supports participating in APWA events. And so I decided I was going to start doing that because I really did value that partnership of the agencies with the private sector that I enjoyed in the past and wanted to continue. I also had an opportunity to work with a gentleman by the name of Vic Bianis, who is currently the APWA national president. Just a little sea story is that Vic and I were at San Diego State studying civil engineering together back in the day. And so we have known each other for decades. And so he had left employment with the city of San Diego to go work for the San Diego County Water Authority. And then he came back to the city of San Diego, and we had brought him on board first as the assistant director of the transportation stormwater department. And then I had an opportunity to promote him to be the public utilities director. And so he was a huge proponent of APWA even back then. And he used to tell me, Paz, you need to become a director. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just so busy. I used to be a director or an officer at SAME, but I just don't have the time. And Vic is very insistent and persistent, and so he worked on my guilty conscience, because I used to also pitch it that we got to make time to develop those relationships and really promote our communities. And so I dove in and became a member of the APWA board locally. But I have not followed him to the national level.
I love Vic. I met him when I spoke in California, and man, his energy is just awesome. And then I met the past president, Dominic Lombardi, I think is how he pronounces it.
Lombardi, yeah.
Yes.
He's wonderful too.
He's great. Met him in South Carolina, and so yeah, just what amazing people. And maybe we'll take a moment just to highlight, because I love associations. I think they're vital for not only training, that's the obvious, but it's the network. And especially because my highlight, especially for municipalities, you are the public works director for, right, whether it's San Diego, Carlsbad, wherever. It's not like you can go down to the Chamber of Commerce and hang out with another public works director. Like, you're the one. And so these associations and their chapter events and their national events, they allow you to be around other people who are rowing in the same waters. And it's not just to share tactical insights and wisdom. It's the emotional, there's a lot of stress that goes into these positions. And like you say, and maybe we'll talk about this as we dive in now into municipalities, is it's missional work. And so there's so much, like, you see the work that you do that impacts people on a daily basis, the roads they drive to, they drive on, that connects them to life and people and relationships and work, etc. Like, and most of the stuff, especially public works, water, roads, these things are just taken for granted. They're really we only notice them when they're broken, right? When things aren't working right. And so even though it's hyper missional, it's also can be, it can lack the reward of gratification if you're looking for parades and stuff to be thrown for you. And so it's nice to be around. That's why these associations help you kind of, again, celebrate one another and the work that you're doing. That's what I loved when a handful of APWA events I've been to, when they're highlighting like the cool projects you guys are doing, and they're mind blowing. And again, maybe because we don't understand what a diamond, interchange is, or these roundabouts, or like, I don't know what this is. It's just frustrating, but like, they are amazing engineering feats, a lot of these things. And so maybe speak to, because you've been both the president of the San Diego Imperial Counties chapter, and you've been a part of the national component. Speak to why you think being a part of the APWA at the local level and the national level is important.
So my experience with APWA has been absolutely amazing. And it's what you get out of it is what you put into it. And so when Vic did encourage me to participate more, I said, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. I was active with SAME. I'm no longer affiliated with the military on a day in, day out basis. It was more about the city. So let me go ahead and engage. What I do appreciate is, as you had mentioned, the networking, and a little bit of, I guess, being careful with relationships in the military was with the consultants and the contractors, because through all of our contractual training and the defense acquisition professional program, they emphasize that you don't want anybody to question the reason why you awarded a contract to a given private entity, right? It is because it was fair, above board, and so on. And so there was a little bit of hesitation with regards to being really close to those who were providing those services, because then you might be perceived as having favoritism or drawing up a deal in the back room or something like that, which was not ever the case, at least in my personal dealings. Transitioning that through APWA, it was very interesting that the consultants that I worked with were so well versed with regards to the needs of the city, and in particular, the city of San Diego. And I also knew that from when I was in the private sector, and I would get insights into the city of San Diego and the other cities just from the others that I was working with, so from the private sector. And so I grew to appreciate what the private sector brings to the table. And so getting to know a lot of them, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm the city engineer, contracted, but I'm the city engineer for you name whichever small city it is that's here. And I said, oh, you're doing the same exact thing that we're doing, but we have staff, city staff, as compared to a consultant that's performing the same functions. And so because of their wealth of experience in various cities and across the board, I grew to appreciate what they provided to the community. And so when I was with the city of San Diego, I did encourage others to participate in the events and just learn so much, but also you pick everyone's brains of, hey, I've got this issue, what do you think? And then you're steered in a certain direction. And so I love the partnership that APWA provides for the whole community that's here. As I got to know everyone, whether they were city staff or county or in the private sector, everyone really pulled together to deliver. I did change a bit of my position when I was with the city of San Diego. I said, sure, all you consultants, come in if you want to give your sales pitch. My door is open to everyone. And so I told my secretary at the time, if anybody calls, absolutely, so long as I accept everyone's offer, I'm being consistent, they can give me their sales pitch. So that was my approach at that time. When I got to the city of Carlsbad, I realized I didn't have that luxury of time because I was immersed in more of the day-to-day here than I was in the city of San Diego. And so I said, I am not meeting with anyone across the board at all. If they reach out to me and ask, the answer is no. So I am consistently not meeting with anybody that's trying to do business development. However, if they come to APWA and I'm there, then I will talk to them all day long. I will sit down, I will network with them, because then everybody else can hear what I have to say. Whether it's a formal presentation, if I'm there, then it's not a one-on-one that I'm favoring one company over another. And so that has been a change in my approach with different consultants. But I still think the world of, everyone who contributes to APWA, and especially the luncheons and the sponsorships that we have, because that the networking that occurs is really invaluable.
After more than 325 episodes with local government leaders and thousands of conversations on stages and workshops across North America, there is one pattern I keep seeing regardless of the size, the structure, or even the budget of the organization. The people who are the most technically skilled are often the ones we are promoting into leadership. But then we expect those technical skills to translate. But let's be honest, leading people is a completely different job, a completely different reality. It's like learning a foreign language. When that gap isn't addressed, it shows up everywhere. in communication and accountability, in the very cultures we are trying to create, build, and sustain. And it shows up in the weight those new leaders now have to carry every day. That's exactly why I created the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, or for short, what we call the MLDC. It was built specifically for local government leaders who were promoted for their skills, but never fully prepared to lead people. If you are feeling that gap, or if you're seeing it on your team, in a department, now is the time to address it. Learn more and schedule a conversation at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC, or simply use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. So good. I want to get to what it was like when you were president of the San Diego chapter. I think you guys hosted the national the big PWX conference. I want to get to that, but before we do that, let's talk about, as you transition then into municipalities, working for the city of San Diego, then the city of Carlsbad. To our national audience, the city of Carlsbad is just north of San Diego. It's actually a part of this big metro area that's like 3 million plus people, just huge. But the city of San Diego, 1.4 million. It's like the second most populous city in California, the eighth most populous city in the United States. So this is a large city. So the national audience of our leaders probably won't resonate with the challenges and the realities of that, but they will connect more with Carlsbad. But speak to that. What was it like? What's it like in a city that size with public works? Just thinking about the traffic, thinking about the infrastructure that makes a city of that size function. Maybe give us a quick eye into the world of leadership in that realm.
Sure. It's interesting because the Navy is so huge. Like my last command was global. So, I travel to Japan or the Horn of Africa or the East Coast at any given time. So, and, we talked about billions. We have our military construction program, billions and big dollar amounts, right? And so I was used to that. So, for example, the commanding officer of NAVFAC Southwest, the Naval Facilities Engineering Command here in San Diego, has all the southwestern states under her responsibility now, and she has well over 3,000 employees, and so that is a little bit of a footnote, because the city of San Diego, when I was there, had over 11,000 employees. Within my branch of the infrastructure and public works, I had well over 3,000 employees. And so there was more of a correlation to the leadership associated within the Navy and the different commands of being responsible for an organization that's that large. As compared to here in the city of Carlsbad, with only 115,000 residents as compared to the 1.4 million in the city of San Diego. I have total headcount about 200 staff right now in public works doing the same thing that the branch in the city of San Diego had. It was so layered, and that's why I said that, from a management of my time, I was able to interact with those who wanted to develop relationships and do business development. And so I was looking at a more strategic perspective and also interacting with the mayor's office, because we were in operations and then the mayor had an office for policy. And really, how do we manage that and move things forward? As well as there are 9 council members in the that we also had to respond to, and so those were a bit challenging because there was so much, and there was a huge program that was $1 billion plus for pure water in San Diego that we were rolling out and trying to get our arms around. There was just so much. So very high level from the Navy perspective, you ride the top of the waves, right? And you deal with very high level that comes up to you and you don't get involved in the day to day, because then you have your directors or the more junior staff that are dealing with it and cranking out what it is that has to be produced. Here, my name is there on the website. So I get emails, I get phone calls, and I love it. I mean, it's the interaction with the community, and the city of Carlsbad is a very engaged community, in the sense that they know a lot. A lot of them are retired, and they used to be a public works director at another city. They would call me and they would tell me what they used to do in the other city. And so it's more intimate. It's more interactive, and so I do enjoy that aspect of it. But more involvement, more engagement with the community, whereas not as much when I was with the city of San Diego. But wonderful staff across the board. I really do love dedicated public staffs.
And for our national audience, if you're not familiar with Carlsbad, again, north of San Diego, this is Legoland. So I've got to visit every time because my kids are Lego fanatics. It's also the golf capital. I think you've got Callaway, TaylorMade, Titleist. And the golf there is amazing. There's a couple courses, a couple gems that I sneak to every time I'm down. I want to talk for a minute about public works, specifically for a city like Carlsbad, because it's Public Works Week. I just want to highlight what is over. This is what you are over. It's not just public works when we think of, potholes. We've got construction management and inspection, environmental sustainability, especially you're right next to the sea. You have fleet and facilities, transportation, utilities. There's a lot more that we just don't understand. And again, and this is why I love this podcast, not only to highlight the journeys of you as leaders, but what you do to produce what we as residents just take for granted. We just turn on our water and flush our toilets and expect it all to work. And you guys not only are overseeing the day-to-day operational components of how we live our modern lives, but specifically for public works, the infrastructure that takes decades, that has to last decades. And then when you repair this stuff, it's not like it's $100. These are multi-million, billion-dollar projects. Maybe just speak to what are some of the challenges that our audience should be aware of when it comes to public works, and what are the cool things that you love, especially at the local level, like in Carlsbad, that really excites you about being a part of public works?
I love public works and everything that we do, but it depends on where I want to say where you're stationed, but it depends on where you work, is what public works entails. And so what we did here in Carlsbad was touching a little bit on what was previously done in the city of San Diego. And again, the previous city manager came from the city of San Diego as well. And reconstructed, the organization to be able to improve on providing services. Public Works was the one that was already basically encapsulated, and there was very minimal change with regard to our organization. But one of the things that I really, truly appreciated is within each of the departments. So, for example, for utilities, it's responsible for water, wastewater, and our recycled water, was that the maintenance folks who did our operations and maintenance, all of our maintenance workers, utility workers, and what have you, were in the same department as our engineers. Mm-hmm. And so it was really, truly about asset management across the board. Somebody says water, it doesn't matter. It's that whole department, and the director in charge of that was responsible for it. And so that was great. When I first started here, that wasn't the case for transportation. So we had the general services, which included the streets and storm drain maintenance. So we had the maintenance aspect, and then we had the engineers that were in the transportation department. So So I was like, well, one department, it's wonderful. You're talking, this is how you do things. And yet, why don't we align it so that when you say transportation or you're talking about drainage, it is all one team. So our streets and storm drain maintenance left general services and came on over and worked with the engineers focusing on delivering our pavement management program and everything across the board to make sure that we're all in sync and that the engineers are listening to our maintenance and operations staff on how we can improve the asset, the infrastructure asset. And because I didn't like the terminology general services, because doesn't matter where you're at, it's just not descriptive enough. Some have general services that include facilities, some don't, some include streets, some don't. And so we changed it because utilities is descriptive, transportation is descriptive. So we changed the remainder of general services to fleet and facilities because that was what they were focusing on. And so our fleet has grown exponentially. We have a wonderful fleet superintendent by the name of Bradley Northup, who, by the way, was the APWA Professional Manager of the Year for public fleet last year. And so he's doing an awesome job. And our public fleet continues to be in the top 10 and top 20, whatever it is. We were the number one small fleet last year. So those are, some of the accolades that we have a very small group, but then we accomplish a lot in taking care of it. And we do also take care of everything, all the fire, engines, the ladders, equipment, everything in support of our public safety partners for the police department, as well as utilities and everything across the board. So we do have some amazing staff that take care of all that. But integrated with that is our environmental sustainability team. And one of the things that is absolutely wonderful is that we cross-check with each other and make sure that we do keep things in mind. We just celebrated Earth Month last month, and so from a stormwater perspective, when we're doing the drainage and, we're right now updating our drainage master plan and considering, well, should we have a stormwater fee and how will that pan out? And really the cross-population of our amazing staff and having those conversations within Public Works is wonderful. It's monumental, I think, to have that kind of working together and collaborating. So I love our team, brag about them all day long, and it's been the same structure that we've had since our former city manager restructured about 7 years ago.
I think you highlight something so vital in municipal work is you have all these departments and it's easy to silo. It's easy to just communicate just with your area. And the more, I just love that wisdom and that insight, the more you can really connect the dots and put things together, the more not only communication, but projects and working together. And I think that's the thing. Like I just had on a county manager and he was talking about public works and the idea of, if you're not talking together with like a county and city, you might repair the same road twice, or you might, frustrate residents because it was just closed. The city was just working on, well, now the county's got to do something. And so it is, even in, Carlsbad is smaller than San Diego by quite a bit. And yet there's still plenty of opportunity for miscommunication or non-collaboration. And so it doesn't matter what size you're in. I think being mindful of how can you bring people, areas, departments, activities together is monumental in getting the work done because it's busy. You guys always have your hands full with projects and things you have to respond to, things that need to be fixed, things that are going to move forward. So it's really cool to hear how you guys are tackling that. I want to be mindful of your time today. Maybe just speak to how when the PWX came, the big annual conference for the entire APWA, what was that like being a part of putting on something of that scope? What is the is the one this year in Houston, or was that last year?
Coming up this August, September is in Houston. It was in Chicago last year.
That's right.
And it was in San Diego in 2023. So it's for those who have never been involved with it, it's a multiple year effort. And so we started about 3 years before in formulating. And actually, Vic Bianas and Kevin Gibson were the co-chairs. And then we had a very military-like org chart that says, all right, you're in charge of this branch, you're in charge of this branch. And we had all sorts of meetings to do the coordination and just making sure that that everything was just spot on, locked in. I remembered earlier on, of course, being the military person that I am from the Navy, I was very adamant that we go with the USS Midway for our Get Acquainted party. It is not cheap to do so. And so, in working with APWA National, I said, all right, you're going to have to increase your fundraising to be able to do that. And so we did. And so it ended up being huge success. I still hear from other PWX attendees when who went to who came to San Diego for it, and oh my gosh, you left it, and then they rave about the Midway. I also wanted to make sure that the Navy did participate. So because of my connections, ended up reaching out so that the admiral who was responsible for Commander Naval Base San Diego was one of our speakers, and he did a fabulous job. I had an opportunity to introduce him. Unfortunately, Mayor Todd Gloria was unable to attend, but I introduced his video in which he welcomed everyone to San Diego, and then we had the color guard, and they were as sharp as could be, and it just made me really proud that we were able to highlight the connection with San Diego and the Navy, and showcase what we have here. We also promoted the international aspect and how we're neighbors with Mexico, and the International Affairs Committee, chaired by Myrna Dayton, with the City of San Diego, did an amazing job of welcoming those who came from, there were a total of 17 countries that were represented at that PWX. And so it was wonderful. It was the highest attendance at that time. We broke all sorts of records. Haven't kept track on whether or not that we still have the record, but anyway, it was still a lot of fun regardless, and definitely an experience of a lifetime. And if anybody that's listening has not ever been to PWX, I encourage them to go. I'm looking forward to going to Houston this year.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then you've got the snow conference, which I was in Cleveland this last year. I think I was talking to the speakers, or we were talking about speaking for it. And I'm like, well, Halting Winter, you got to bring me out to the snow conference. Like it's just a match. I said, well, we're going to make that happen someday. But what a story. What a life, from the Philippines to a commanding officer in the U.S. Navy to private sector to now the public sector in the city of Carlsbad. What an amazing journey you've had, but more importantly, just amazing impact. What an inspiration you are to people in all kinds of fields. I think that's the inspirational thing. You've just been at the highest of the game in all these aspects, and it's not just the leadership, it's the impact. That's why I love local government is the impact you guys have, not only for present day realities, but for futures to make our cities and communities thrive and flourish. What a life. And it's still not over. You're doing great work, continuing to do great work. I look forward to meeting you in person when I'm down in Carlsbad next. Anything else, Paz?
I just want to share that it really is about the future. And, some folks have asked me, well, when are you going to retire? And I said, I am actually already retired from the Navy. I love what I do. But just the other day for Cinco de Mayo, actually, I was at San Diego State and was speaking with a group of students about their future and really looking into public works. There were different types of engineering disciplines. And of course, I was pitching for the Navy Civil Engineer Corps as well. And a couple of them were interested. But I really do appreciate the growth of our future and then bringing them along. There is an APWA student chapter at San Diego State, and over at UCSD, we also promote trying to get them involved as well. So the only thing that I would just like to add is that, no matter what accomplishments any of us seasoned professionals have had, it's really about taking care of those who are coming behind us. And so I would like to advocate for doing that.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of public works is military, private sector, public sector. You have so many areas and there's so many disciplines. I mean, that's what I love doing is beating the drum, obviously, for local gov. But even in that, there's so many ways to apply your specific talents, skills, passions. And so, and I love too that you have in this second chapter after the military and your retirement, you're still using those skills. And that's why I love helping military, because a lot of military don't know local gov is an option for them afterwards.
Exactly.
It's like, man, there's great opportunities to use those skills and to still have, impact and a career. So, what an amazing story, Paz. Thanks for sharing your life, your leadership journey, and your insights. It's been great.
Thank you so much. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. That was amazing. The stories we share here on the Halting Winter Podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.